Good morning. Welcome to Bayou, New Hampshire. I'm Julian Smith, otherwise known as Puddy. This is Whale Rock Pond. This is a spring-fed swimming hole that I dug over the course of several summers in the 1970s. It's very cold, and give me a call if you'd like to take a real cold swim with some leeches. They're very nice, very friendly leeches. Let's walk down here to Handkerchief Rocks Brook. There's not much water flowing through the brook right now because the beavers have rebuilt a dam, and that temporarily slows it down. This brook used to be on U.S. Geological Survey maps back in the 1800s, and sometime after the Second World War, the brook disappeared from the Geological Survey map because the farmers had kept the fields so well ditched that when it rained or snow melt, water just rushed through and kept eroding a channel. So the brook had become seasonal. Now it's a permanent brook, and if I open the beaver dam this morning, you can see quite a bit of water flowing through here. This brook is called Handkerchief Rocks Brook because of the large glacial erratics on the hillside up there, and that is worth a walk. Kids like to climb the erratics. The dam over here on my left, on your right, is the lowest of four waterfalls on beaver dams. The beavers have not maintained the little dam here. Every few years they build a stick dam across the flow. And the granite waterfall rocks you see there are rocks I brought in. One of the reasons I put a dam there is in the late 1960s, I discovered on this property the earthen remains, the dirt remains of a number of pre-colonial era beaver dams. And by pre-colonial era, I mean before the time that English settlers arrived on the coast of New England. Sometime before 1600, almost all of the beavers in upstate New York and in what is now New England had been trapped and had disappeared from the coast of New England, from most of New England, until they were reintroduced in the 1920s in various states. So let's walk upstream. This pond here, which you can't see very clearly, I call Lily Pond because at one point it was full of lilies, water lilies. But then one winter, the beavers dug up probably 95% of all of the beaver corms or roots to eat them for the starch. When beavers get hungry, there's no stopping them. Here is an example of what beavers do. This is one of 3 cedar trees they took down several weeks ago. They gnawed all the way through the cedars, and this cedar had been used back before when it was young as a fence post. You can see the barbed wire that is left. This is the second lowest of the 4 beaver dams I mentioned. When I first bought this property, there were a number of very large elm, oak, and swamp maple trees growing on mounds in the swamp, and those mounds were the remains of pre-colonial beaver lodges. Apparently the beavers had been living in this watershed for thousands of years, and when you have beavers for thousands of years repairing or building new lodges on the site of old lodges beside a brook, you get a rather high pile of mud. So there are beavers moving through here almost every night. There are muskrats living in this pond. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet deep at the deepest out in the middle. And this is another one of my waterfalls. If you look down here, this was the first waterfall I installed, and the beavers built a dam on top of it and kept building the dam along where this walkway is, this crushed stone path. So I let them do that, and I removed the sticks in their beaver dam, which was quite long, used them for firewood for kindling, and compressed the muck, rolled it, and put crushed stone on top. Did this several times, removed several beaver dams. Every few nights, they build a little stick and mud dam across this waterfall. And when this path gets flooded, then I remove their little dam. It takes me about 5 minutes. And you can see behind you over there, the stuff that I pull out of their dam. I just pile it up to buttress the edge of this embankment. Here is the biggest of the beaver dams in this watershed. A part of it is on my land, and the rest, the majority of it, is on university land. Off to the right is a path that my wife and I cleared back in the late 60s and early 70s that goes all the way over to the farm road behind Highland House that connects to the West Foss Farm property owned by UNH. And if we stood here long enough, we would see joggers, runners, bird watchers, or bicyclists coming through. And sometimes the bicyclists come through very quickly. Anyway, this is this dam here, and this path you see, marks the site of a very large pre-colonial beaver dam that went up in that direction behind us. This tree is, this old oak tree here, is growing on the base, on part of an old beaver dam. But my first winter on this property in 1967, while I was preparing to buy it, I noticed a strange ridge running through a swamp. And I realized it was the remains of a beaver dam. And if you can imagine a beaver dam like this, when it gets old and rots, goes down, then the beavers build another dam, and it rots. And each time it rots, it's a few inches higher. You do this for a few thousand years, you end up with a pretty substantial ridge of soil on which trees grow. Now, here is a stick dam that the beavers built over the course of 2 nights. And if I leave them to it, they will keep raising it and raising it and raising it. I've gone away, when I was teaching elsewhere, I'd go away for months and I'd come back and there would be a new beaver dam all the way across this impoundment. This waterfall rock down here is about 4.5 or 5 feet higher than the level of the brook when I first started working here. First I put riprap in the brook to back up the water in the swamp, which created a good habitat and a good reserve of water for beavers. And beavers moved in and built a dam here. Beavers build dams for one very simple purpose, to have an impoundment for water, a pond. And the purpose of the pond is twofold. One, it supplies beavers with a place to escape from predators. And secondly, and just as important, or perhaps more important, it is their refrigerator, it is their freezer, it is their pantry. Beavers in the summer and fall store fresh wood for their winter meals. They cut down trees, cut off the branches, drag them down, and leave them underwater. And that keeps the bark fresh. They want to eat the layer, the starchy layer of carbohydrates under the rough bark. They don't eat the outer bark. And of course they eat primarily maples, oaks, willows, aspens. They really like aspens. And in a bit, I'll show you, if we notice one, trails where the beavers go out into the nearby meadow to eat clover. They love clover. This stick I'm carrying was presented to me by the beavers in appreciation for my work on their behalf. And I've done nothing to this stick but put on a little linseed oil. And they carved it exactly for my use. Of course, I had to pick up 3,000 or 4,000 pieces of wood out of dams like this before I found one that was just right. I have several others. Anyway, so as over the course of some 30 years, or more than 30 years, the beavers kept raising the water level in this pond, and I kept raising the level of my waterfalls. First the riprap dam down there, then a wallflower rock on top, and then another waterfall rock, and then another one. And I could keep on. There's a waterfall rock on top of the last one you can see. That is right under here. Now, before you worry about my disturbing the beavers or making work for them, actually this dam that you're looking at that we're about to walk over saves energy for beavers. It's easier for them to maintain something like this. They can put this up overnight. I can take it away in 5 or 10 minutes. And if the beavers had to maintain a dam all the way across, it would be a lot of work, because those dams start to leak more, they rot, etc., etc. So in terms of energy expenditure, the beavers have the advantage of not having to do much maintenance. I do the main maintenance, and they have more time to make baby beavers and to eat and to relax and to visit neighbors and relatives. So let's keep walking. In the early 1970s, after I realized that the ridge that went through here, that's about 6 feet lower than where we are now, was an ancient beaver dam, I brought in several truckloads of crushed stone in the summer and had them left out at the edge of the field, edge of the meadow. And then using a wheelbarrow and plywood duck boards, I laid out a nice level path. And a few years later, while I was teaching in upstate New York, I came back after several months to visit and found beavers had built this long dam. They had taken down hundreds of trees, had flooded a swamp that was full of large elms and maples and oaks and so on. So I took away their dam the following summer, took away the sticks, compressed the muck, brought in another truckload of crushed stone. And the beavers and I have done this 5 or 6 times. That as I've taken away, when I come back in the summer after being away, I'll take away a large dam, take away the sticks for firewood for kindling, and put down sheets of plywood, and I have a granite roller, and I roll the muck, compact it. Then I bring in some crushed stone. It's good exercise. It keeps me young, or keeps me healthy. I'm gonna get old anyway. The beavers come out here, and in some mornings you'll see a wet trail across here. They go out to eat clover in the field. They look like a bunch of small buffalo. Sometimes I see three or four fat beavers lined up side by side munching on clover. They really like clover. So a beaver pond on the edge of a hay meadow is a good location. There's the main beaver lodge. That lodge is about 15 years old. Their first big beaver lodge is now underwater. That is, when they dammed the brook in the early 70s, they built a lodge on the very edge of the brook. And since the water level is much higher than then, that lodge has disappeared. If you look over to the right along the bank, you'll see some trees that have not been girdled, have not been killed, growing on the bank. And the beavers have bank dens under the roots of those trees. Beavers have evolved a strategy. It's a genetic strategy, or a strategy in their DNA that they're not aware of, probably, that it would be a mistake to kill trees on an embankment under which they can dig a lodge or a den protected by the roots of the tree, of the living tree. And that makes it harder for bears to get at them. A bear could, hungry enough, pull apart a beaver lodge to get at the beavers. The beavers, of course, would vacate. The beavers will take down all of the trees on this slope. So you see the only trees standing are some hickories, shagbark hickories, which they have not gnawed on. And what they want are the young aspens and maples and oaks. And some mornings I'll come in here and there may be 2 or 3 beavers early in the morning before the sun comes up, nibbling away, particularly the young ones. The reason they girdle these trees, and they don't know this is the reason, as they don't know it intellectually, unless they're smarter than I think they are. The reason they do this is that they're descended from, say, millions of generations of beavers who've been doing this. Because they're descended from beavers that started doing this millions of years ago. And the advantage to the beaver is that by killing these large trees, which provide a canopy, they are allowing the sunlight to hit the forest floor, and new trees come up. You see over there quite a few aspens and some birches and some maples. Every few years I come through here with my clippers and cut down the little pine trees, because the beavers don't want the pine trees, and I don't want the pine trees growing up and obscuring or taking over what is a supermarket for beavers. This is a supermarket. And further on, I'll show you a beaver convenience store. I took down a lot of pine trees in here years ago to let light into the woods. There were no hardwoods here because this was basically a small pine forest. By taking down the pines, I did what the beavers like and created a situation where yummy birches and aspens and oaks and maples can grow up. So if any young oak trees rather pine trees get started in here, I take them out. And over here is my roller. This is a 19th century granite and wrought iron lawn roller. And all I have to do, if I'm compressing muck, is put plywood down and pull it like that. It's Good for the legs. I mean, why go to a fitness place when you can work out with this? Okay? This is how we Yankees do it, and I'm not even from New England. Which is why I call this place Bayou New Hampshire, because I'm from Louisiana. There was no granite in this area by this pond when we came here. The colonial era farmers spent a lot of time and a lot of effort hauling granite away, getting it out of the fields. The granite was left, of course, by the glaciers. But this rock I'm sitting on, like all of the rocks around the edge of this pond, were given to me by Rudy Nemai, a stonemason who built a number of significant walls, beautiful walls in Durham. I admired his work, and one day I asked if he would sell me some of his granite, his leftover granite, near his house on Mill Road, and he gave me a couple of truckloads of granite. I had to have them taken away, and I had them dumped at the edge of the pond, and I dragged them in by hand. And I imagine the Native Americans who lived near beaver ponds would take beaver dams apart for their nice firewood. There's a beaver dam 100 yards long that have thousands and thousands of sticks like this. And here comes the muck. Yeah, little sticks, leaves. Pondweed. And I'll come back later and put the muck in my wheelbarrow to add to the berm that supports this dam. And I'll bring the sticks over to one of my burn piles, where I burn the sticks and use the wood ash to grow things. Now the beavers will hear this and they will say, "Oh, he's done it again. What is wrong with that guy?" Little do they know, I'm their friend. Or maybe they do know. And there is what a beaver dam looks like when there's not an old guy taking care of it. There have been 3 separate beaver colonies here over the years. That is, in the late 60s, they started building a dam and a lodge, and their lodges spread all over this area. But this is on the site of a pre-colonial beaver dam. Ina Thompson, who owned the Highland House, which is where I stayed when I first came here in 1965, looking for a house. Ina told me these were called the handkerchief rocks because 50, 60 years ago, 75 years ago perhaps, before these trees grew up, guests from the Highland House would take a picnic and walk across the hayfield and across the pasture and climb up on these rocks. There was an old wooden ladder, and they would stand on the rocks and wave their handkerchiefs to the people sitting on the porch at Highland House. And I wish the university would cut down these trees so we could see that again. It's not Frost who says, "Good fences make good neighbors." Yeah. It's the neighbor of the speaker in the poem. Frost takes the opposite position.